Okay, so we're live on Facebook here.
Wonderful. I will.
And then, so it's now on Heart Mind Alchemy. And now I'm going to share it out to Heart Mind Alchemy Lab.
Beautiful.
And Enlightened World Network. So you should be able to share it to anywhere that you want to share it to.
Yep. I'm just about going to share it now.
Hello, everybody that's watching. We're just getting all the shares going.
Yeah.
So let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, we can start whenever you want.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Heart Mind Alchemy Lab podcast live show, and super excited today to follow up on our theme of flexible histories that we started with last week with Skye Nelson Isaacs talking about quantum physics of time travel and wholeness. And today we're following up with the wonderful Stephen Altair. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Holly, and hi, everybody. It's always an incredible blessing to be with you. So thank you for the invite.
Yeah, oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. So Heart Mind Alchemy Lab, what we do here is weave a beautiful blend of consciousness, meditation, technology, and healing, and enlighten leaders in that space. And I'm super excited to have Stephen Altair here. He's been on the show before. He's a meditation teacher with Raising Our Vibration. He's an incredible meditation teacher in a number of different types of disciplines of meditation, has been meditating for 50 or more years, 60 years, and has just incredible wealth of knowledge, teaches astrology, lucid dreaming, mystical arts of all kinds, and has a beautiful way of blending the mystical traditions with science. And so he's just a perfect fit for the show, and he's been on before, and I'm really, really excited that he came on today because he had been having conversations with Dr. Julia Mossbridge at IONS about this topic, and she's an expert in time travel and leading meditations and teaching to people about what we think about time and how we actually can work with time in ways that you probably haven't thought of before to improve our own futures for health and well-being. So inspired by that, we brought Stephen on, and I just want to open, Stephen, with this question that we posed to the audience in the description. Is it possible to travel through time and visit our past to create and plan a positive future? It's probably something that's most people don't really think about, that we could actually visit our past to change our future, but you're actually saying that we can. Is that right?
Yeah, that is very true. That is, I've just been a lovely conversation with Kevin Scheininger. So we both run Raising Our Vibration community, and we've had exactly this very similar conversation. So I'm going to begin by sharing my screen and popping up a PowerPoint for those of you that, so I'll just make sure that you can see this okay. Is it clear on your screen, Holly, and hopefully clear on everybody else?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, so flexible histories, it's actually a topic near and dear to my heart right from when I was very little, because of some experiences that happened to me when I was very young. But first, I just want to introduce the whole topic by considering, are our histories flexible, and therefore, of course, if our histories are flexible, are our futures flexible? Because this is, we're often considering this from a space-time continuum, right? So does that mean that what we consider is often very linear? We often think of things as being, okay, it goes from past to present to future. We're kind of taught that from when we're very young. Is that the way it actually is? So let's consider that perhaps that's not the way it actually is. So when we look at the kind of power of the acausal, non-local group, I've been curious about quantum physics from when I was very little. So my, dad ran a hospital, and so did my mum. So I was very privileged to be in the company of lots of research and lots of scientists and doctors from when I was very little. And I used to have this running joke with my friends. They'd say, "Oh, what did you do in your hospital? What did you do in your holidays?" And I'd say, "I was in the hospital." I said, "Were you sick?" I said, "No, I was helping my dad on the wards." So that was how I spent it. In fact, a lot of my little one's life learning from doctors and being present, and and doing lots of research into medicine with my dad. He used to let me see into all the autoclaves and all the things that they made, and it was great. So I've been one of my curiosities over the years has been in quantum physics itself, and can we actually go beyond time and space? And it's also been part of my practice in meditation. Certainly, a lot of my interest in neuroscience itself has been, the non-local, non-space-time parts of the brain and parts of the heart mind. What does that really mean? If we are not truly bound by space and time, how does that actually show? How does it show in terms of science? And I've been following for some time a research group based in Vienna. So this is the work of Anton Zeilinger, a very innovative physicist who's been looking at quantum teleportation. Because I've always considered that if anything is going to show the non-local, properties of space-time, then it's going to be quantum teleportation. And they've actually been able to teleport information about quantum states of photons from one place to another. Now that, to me, this is a reference from Paul Halpin in a very recent book, Synchronicity, of last year. And the fact that, you imagine, right, if we're at this point where we're actually able to quantum teleport information, then consider what that's going to mean 10, 20, 50, 100 years down the track, right? I think we're only really at the very early stages of understanding what a causal, non-local, space-time really means, and the properties and the possibilities for creation for going beyond this. So, touching right on Skye's work and Julia's work and many others who are looking at what is this boundless opportunity to live in this reality actually mean? What is available to us? I think the power, the opportunities for infinite possibility are really right present, and the science and the mystical properties and the power of our consciousness is all starting to meet at this crossroads. So anyway, Anton's work has been very precious to me, and something that really speaks right to the heart of what's actually possible. Well, guess what? We're doing it.
So, Altair, I just want to ask you to clarify, what is acausal non-local exactly? Can you put that into plain words?
Sure. Well, so I'm going to speak to this shortly when I refer to the work of Carl Jung and Wolfgang Poli, who was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, when they spoke about the fact we tend to think of things as being causal, so that this causes this in very simple terms, and we tend to think of our current space-time as having local points, right? You live in a house, I live in a house. We tend to relate to each other. Oh, your body's there and my body's here. Your house is over there, right? We tend to think of everything as being local and causal. I get on a call, you ring me up, we book this. It seems to have a sequence and time all fixed to it, right? It feels very fixy and sticky. But then when you start to think that the real properties of space-time are not causal at all, they are acausal, which is what Jung and Poli proposed in terms of synchronicity, that at the other end of the spectrum, there are these random events that occur that still have meaning. And this is what Sky has been pointing to in his work of synchronicity, is that, so there are acausal and also non-local events. So what if this whole drama that we see is a complete illusion? What if quantum physics points to it not being local at all? So I think that those kinds of connections, the acausal connections, the ones that are not in a sequence, that don't seem to be predetermined by past, present, future, which is the way, or that are flexible. And this is again pointing to Sky's work on synchronicity, are really, as Paul pointed out and Anton had pointed out, are very vital and practical in terms of us understanding the way that the cosmos really works. So does that help a little bit?
I think it does. So I mean, I maybe would broadly say not fixed in time and space the way that we normally
not the way we normally think about it. And this goes right back to, for those of you listening who are meditators, it goes right back to, we normally fix our attention, right, on something. We have an object that we meditate upon. We have a way that our attention always goes out to objects. So what if our attention were to, find a different way? What if it were to be turned inwards on itself? It may actually, just like Andrew Newberg has discovered, may find non-local, so non-local, non-space, non-time aspects in the human physiology that are able to access exactly these states. So I'm going to speak about that shortly.
And that's exactly what meditators know, and what the illusory nature of reality, what has been said for thousands of years now, right? This is actually physics starting to catch up with some of that.
Yes, and yes. Yeah, so I wanted to refer to a little bit of the mystical in the midst of the beautiful quantum physics and mechanics, and that is that say this is a little passage of St. John of the Cross that I've always loved, that I've read hundreds and hundreds of times, and I've always settled on it with the same curiosity as I might with neuroscience or with quantum physics. And he says, on that glad night in secret, no one saw me. So this is from stanza 2 and 3 of Dark Night of the Soul. Nor did I look at anything with no other light or guide than the one that burned in my heart. This guided me more surely than the light of noon to where he was awaiting me. Him I knew so well, there in a place where no one appeared. Right? I love this final sentence, a place where no one appeared. The potential of the non-local, no space, no time, mystical dimension is spoken also right across the ages, from St. Teresa of Avila to St. Hildegard of Bingen to St. John of the Cross. They all speak about this no place, no. So where do we find that in the human brain? Where do we find that in our experience? So this has been the place where no one appears. So contemplate that while you're listening, and even, ideally don't contemplate me or the screen, contemplate your space that is limitless and boundless and all around you, right? So the mystical, I know you're a very mystical creature too, Holly. So, and I know you're tuning right in at the moment to the mystical energies that are present. Day by day, we have this interesting thing that happens in our lives. Sometimes we tune into a day and we think, whoa, this day feels different. It's filled with love, or it's filled with energy, or it's filled with mystery, or it's, there's a general sense of that, which speaks right to this non-local, beyond space and time characteristic of the human being, to pick up energies in the cosmos that are really beyond what we'd normally fix our attention to, right? When our attention's fixed on this everyday world and it's object-based, we tend to get very bound. But once we start to let go of that, all these other opportunities for our perception to really start to range wide speak to us, and it's really profound. So
the world becomes completely different in my experience.
Right, simply by altering our perception,
Yes.
simply by taking a different view. Because if you go every day to the same spot and you look at exactly the same thing and you have exactly the same experience, and then suddenly somebody says to you, have you ever thought about actually going right over there and looking back at this? And then suddenly you realize that on the opposite side of what you've seen, the object looks completely different. And you've never ever noticed the other side of it. That's like the changing our perception. We literally see something we never saw before. So you've mentioned already, Holly, the beautiful work of different people I've been in conversations with. So yeah, I've been fortunate the last couple of weeks to have been having some very deep conversations. One was with Julia Mossbridge, who's, as you said, she's got wonderful reputation as a scientist, and particularly her deep interest in love and time and unconditional love and timelessness. So that speaks right to my heart, and I'm really present to the wonderful work she's doing with Tilt. So in fact, Tilt has an open house coming up in October. So any of you who are interested in unconditional love and timelessness, which should be everybody, but I think it'd be a wonderful gathering. But if you want to find out more, you can Google Julia Mossbridge and Tilt, T-I-L-T, which is her organization dealing with unconditional love and timelessness. So and Julia,
this will be an online event, Altair.
Yes, yeah, this is going to be it's an open house. I'm thinking it's both physical and online, but I know I've got an online invitation because she knows I'm in Japan and not able to get right to her doorstep. So I think that'd be a lovely thing for people to go to. Then I'm also present to the work of Alan Thompson. So I was in a wonderful discussion with him about wisdom AI, right? And the possibilities of, on our planet, of artificial intelligence no longer being artificial, but being awake. There's no doubt that computers and technology is part and parcel of our everyday life. So what if we were to get all the programmers and creators to actually come from awareness and come from love and come from wisdom? So one of the things Dr. Thompson's looking at, so he uses the GPT-3 language model for awake intelligence, and Leta, who is the avatar, who's the woman who appears here. So there's a video avatar. And he shared some of the awareness questions that he's posed to her, and these answers that are constructed not in this case from a database like Google, but from the inspired works of wisdom people like the Dalai Lama and so on. So I thought that was constructing an awake intelligence model that is based on wisdom points to a whole different level of possibility for us in terms of the way that humanity approaches technology. Because I think it's crucial. I think Dr. Zubra from Mellon Carnegie Institute or Carnegie Mellon Institute has spoken about the fact that the future of AI is going to be loving grace, and that the future of AI is also going to speak to us having personal assistants who actually take on persona and act independently for us. And I think that kind of, it's always intrigued me about bilocation, right? So if we can have multi-location facilities in the future, where we have a number of people who represent Holly in the very important meeting. So she needs to go to a shareholders meeting, but it's really just to acquire information, and she sends her avatar, right? So there is a lot of opportunity if that's based. It's like anything, right? You give mankind fire and he creates nuclear weapons, right? You give mankind technology and programming, and he can just as easily create manipulation as anything else. So, and I'm saying he because I do put it firmly at the foot of men who have created a lot of military weapons. So I'd like to propose that a great many women actually embark on the art or the awake intelligence program, because we need this balance of gender on our planet to wake up the divine feminine and bring that whole, potential catastrophic imbalance into balance, and it's sorely needed. So I'm present to the fact that over the pandemic, the amount of spending on military went up. I just like, it was just beyond me. It was just like, who makes these decisions? I mean, and billions and billions of dollars. And then the other person, of course, that both you and I have had conversations with, Ali, has been Sky Nelson Isaacs, and this wonderful living in flow, and his beautiful pointing out towards synchronicity, which is one of the fundamental things I'm addressing here, because synchronicity has been part and parcel of what's been at the heart of this open awareness practice that I've done for so many years. And that you have too. So I know you've got some wonderful insights from Sky as well. So I'm going to jump in right here to talking about, first of all, so how does this no space-time, that what I've been talking about, the acausal, non-local, no space, no time actually show up in us? Because it's all very well talking about quantum physics, but how do we have some kind of direct relationship to this no space, no time? And I really love the work of Andrew Newberg, because he uses a particular type of analysis based on blood flow, and which he calls SPECT, and they look at pre and post meditation states and where and how these non-local, no space, no time states show up. And the research, so he looked at the neurophysiology of religious and spiritual practices. And as I said, he uses this single photon emission computation that called SPECT, which measures this blood flow. And they scanned the brains of Tibetan Buddhist meditators and found decreased activity in the parietal lobe. Now, people might say, what exactly does that mean? Well, the parietal lobe is the area responsible for giving us this sense of orientation in space and time. So the decreased activity actually is associated with no sense of space or time. So when, I know in your practice too, Holly, it's a state you're very familiar with, that this no space, no time, that you literally, it feels like a dropping of identity. As Mooji would say, it's historyless. As Rupert Spira would say, we actually go beyond these, we go beyond the object-based attention. And when we turn that inwards, we find that, in fact, awareness has no boundaries. There's no edges. There's no identity. It's formless. And this is really right in line with the non-local quantum mechanics, quantum physics version of what the universe really is, that there is no actual local points. So this sense of our orientation in space and time is really when our brain is active in that particular area. So that, just using the parietal lobe as one example. And that when we start to dissociate the senses and any cognitive input like the narrative voice, as that starts to vanish and we become less aware of our body, we often associate that state with this no space, no time. And that was exactly the hypothesis that Andrew Newberg and his team at the Marcus Institute of Integrative Studies actually hypothesized. And I thought that was a beautiful kind of connection with what so if it's possible to access no space, no time, if it's possible to access exactly the same states that quantum physics is pointing to, how can we actually do that? So when we look at there was a lovely article in Scientific American on space and time by Musa in 2015 that says, in everyday life, we often take distance and locate, right? It's just like time. We have our schedules, we measure distances, we send mail to different locations. We're so fixed on that. The physics at the most fundamental level suggests that all of this is non-local, that there's no such thing as place or distance. That is a real aha for most people, to consider non-local space-time, and so just as Andrew Newberg was showing that there is the brain that actually can connect to the sense of no space, no time, that physics itself is actually pointing to exactly the same thing. So meditators and neuroscience and physics are all really saying the same thing, that the idea, and it's just an idea, of distance, location, and time is purely an illusion. It simply doesn't, it only exists because we've put a measurement there. And so I'm going to actually then go from this into measurement.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, in a relative sense, it exists in the relative world.
Correct.
You have to get from, your house to your job location. There is a relative distance that you have to travel, right? So I think what is important is to think about, and I know you're working your way there, like, so people hang with us, like, how does this really show up in daily life to improve your life, right? Because it can be really esoteric and, like, so what, it doesn't help me get to my job on time, right?
Correct. Well, I must admit, I've never actually thought that thought, but
Okay.
I was born into the world in a very non-local space-time kind of way. So I've actually thought like quantum physicists for quite some time. So I've never really thought about that. But yes, I know that some people would listen to that and think that, hey, but how does this relate to my job, and how do I get from point A to point B?
So we'll work our way there, but hang with us here.
Yep. We're definitely working our way there. So a little bit about this same, non-local, no space, no time. There's a lot of sharing in ancient traditions about the rainbow body. And it has also made, it's something, again, I've been curious about for many, many years, because I've had a lot of experiences with the rainbow body and with rainbow light, hence my background. And there is a very recent study done also on non-local rainbow space-time by a group in general relativity and quantum cosmology, Refi and Masood in 2020. So this is just very recent, where they looked at the rainbow and demonstrated connection between non-locality and the rainbow. And I thought, this is so curious, because I was in a meditation retreat with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and I experienced rainbow arising spontaneously. It was over quite some period of time, and they simply didn't stop. It was that same non-local, no time. I remember I talked to him about it, and he just said, oh, very, very good. Let it go. And I'm also present to the fact that our dear friend Constantine, who may or may not be listening to this, experienced rainbows arising, and we had photographs of the event so I'm very curious that what I'm pointing to here is that a lot of the physics and a lot of the science and the meditation practice and the ancient wisdom traditions are all pointing to the same thing, are all speaking to the same, non-local, spontaneous. And so sometimes people scratch their head and go, oh my God, what does that mean? Well, it quite possibly means that the way for us to move as humanity is not from the past, right? And that's where I'm going to guide you into very shortly, is how to actually free ourselves from the past. And our if this is really an accurate model, that the space-time is non-local, which is, and that it is acausal, which is what Jung was speaking to and what Poli investigated, then what does that potentially mean for all of our histories that we've taken as being so fixed? Because that's what we've done. So I'm going to jump right into some of my favorite people, Carl Jung and Wolfgang Poli, and they met each other. They actually had quite a bit to do with each other, because Jung, without saying who it was, did a study of Wolfgang Poli's dreams and lucid dreams over quite some considerable period of time. And it was in fact that Poli who first coined this concept, as he was discussing with Jung, posed this diagram. So this is the actual Poli's diagram of connection between causality and space-time, and then synchronicity and energy, like that they are the opposite spectrums. That on one hand you have causality, where we tend to think everything's fixed, and on the other hand we have synchronicity, which is a meaningful event that arises to actually point our life in a particular direction, but it can arise so spontaneously. So and the same with the space-time continuum. We tend to think space and time as local and fixed and measured, as opposed to energy. So this was or infinite energy, which was what Poli posed to Jung. And Jung himself then counter-proposed this variation, which is that causality is this constant connection through an effect. So it's typically how we see the universe. And that synchronicity is inconstant connection. And there's equivalence and contingency and spontaneous arising. And the space-time we tend to think of as being in our houses and being day to day, versus this indestructible, open and boundless energy. So it's really, once you start to consider this, you start to think, okay, so here's one of the world's greatest writers on dreams and psychotherapy, from connecting with one of the world at that time. He was younger than Poli was younger than Einstein, but considered one of the great minds of that time. And in fact, he proposed the idea of the neutrino, which was not discovered until some time later. So Jung did a lot of study on dreams with Poli, and he found that Poli's dreams, so here are the dreams of a well-known physicist, being found in wisdom across the ages. So Jung explored the mandala with him as the archetype of wholeness. He explored the healing process. He looked at all the challenges that Poli was having at that time in terms of the shadow personality or trauma. And then he also drew on physics and Buddhism, Hinduism, philosophy, Kundalini yoga, ancient Egyptian concepts. And I found this really intriguing, that Poli showed these in his dream states, that he showed what Jung was speaking to. And in fact, Poli was, so for those of you who are not familiar with Wolfgang Poli, at the age of 21, he made a critique actually of Einstein's general theory of relativity. And he was considered by Einstein one of the brightest young minds of that time. Einstein said he was quite awed by the fact that a young man could make such a precise and clear critique of something, that was so profound. And so, yeah, Poli proposed the notion of a neutrino, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize some years later, and went to Jung because of the trouble and trauma that he had. And I've always been, enchanted by the fact that Nobel Prize winning physicist and Jung would be so connected and come up with this notion of synchronicity and what synchronicity might actually mean for our practice and our everyday life. The lucid dreams that Poli had, I've had lucid dreams since I was very little. And along with you, Holly and Kiefer, we teach people how to lucid dream. And I had a dream. So this is the reason I'm mentioning about a dream I had as a 2-year-old is I'm going to use this as a subject for understanding how you might work with the power of synchronicity in your life. Because at the age of 2, I did have this, you could call it an event of quite considerable synchronicity, where I dreamed I was a Tibetan monk at this particular monastery, the Samye monastery in Tibet. And I dreamed I was with a companion walking across a bridge. And there's no bridge directly to Samye monastery, but the bridge was like, I guess, an entry point of my consciousness to coming to the monastery. And I was with another monk. I was Tibetan, and I was killed in that event. We both fell off the bridge, and I dropped into a chasm of limitless love and light and this primordial sound. And I had the same dream night after night after night after night, 365 days in a row, to be precise. And at the end of which I went to a lovely doctor called Erin, who helped me to stop the dream simply by taking all my clothes off and lying on bed so that I could reduce my temperature. Now, that particular dream has been that was a particularly meaningful event in my life, because it made me curious about why does a little kid have this dream? I was the subject of numerous tests at hospitals. So that was my first introduction to neuroscience, was as a 2 and a 3-year-old, because my parents thought I had epilepsy. And when they did the tests on my brain, sure, my brain showed, because obviously I was very lucid, showed very high signs of what could have been potentially epileptic, but it was not epilepsy. It was a state of very high degree of lucidity. And it was a connection I had to a past life with the Dalai Lama in 1959. So I was born in 1961, and I was able to tap into this vent and some of the knowledge of it, which has meant that over the years, some 40 plus years of doing various practices, including Tibetan Buddhist practices, that it was very easy for me to tap into that understanding of what the lamas were teaching me. So over the years, I've been taught by the Dalai Lama and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche and many others, and it's been and met them personally and been able to talk with them about this and about other things. So it's been a very beautiful walk. So as you're listening to me, I want you to connect with an event that was meaningful in your life. So we're going to look at 2 particular events as to how you can use this information practically. I'll show you how you can go about doing that. So in Sky Nelson Isaac's work, he talks about the branching tree in physics or in quantum mechanics, where we describe the evolution of anything like an electron or a photon as particles of light. And we talk about the evolution because when those particles interact with another system, they branch into different possibilities, and the possibilities themselves are what quantum mechanics describes, and none of the paths are actualized until they are measured. Now, this is a really crucial fact I want you to consider as you're listening, that if you don't measure, in other words, if you don't objectify a particular event in your past, for example, then basically in terms of this, it is not going to be actualized. And in fact, you can shift it, right? You can literally shift your path or your past by applying a different system of measurement to it. So how might you do that? So a difference, I call it change the measurement and change the path. I mean, lots of people have called it different names, like mind walking, where you rewrite your past to create a different future. So if you consider right now as you're listening, so we're going to take two events and we're going to experiment with them in a very practical exercise. If you take an event from your past, maybe one that's you've had an issue with, it could be a person. So let's say your dad. You've had a difficult episode with your dad at some time or over your life. So this, for the purposes of this experiment that we're going to do, take one simple exercise, not too traumatic, but say an irritation or a point of anger or something that you experienced that had some discomfort. So I want you to consider that in mind. And I also want you to consider a synchronous event. So for me, it could be that dream I had of being a Tibetan monk when I was a little kid, or it could be, for example, as I mentioned to Kevin Scheininger, when we first met Dr. Ruth Anderson introduced us on a show. She was running a TV channel at the time called Enlightened World. And she introduced us as potentially interviewing each other on that show. And it was that synchronicity that led to all the other things, writing a book together, raising a vibration community, all the rest of it. So some events, so I want you to choose two events. So a discomfort, an event of some discomfort or an uncomfortable event, and then also an event that was meaningful. So Holly, I know, I mean, for the purposes of the audience, do you want to say a couple of examples? Because I know you've had a wonderful synchronous event when you were 10. And I don't know whether you want to share that, but it particularly speaks to me as something that when we do this exercise that you could work with, and maybe I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing that, but it's a really pretty profound experience.
You're speaking of the impermanence
event.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. It's funny. It didn't seem so significant to me at the time, but you've often said it's so significant. So the thing that happened was when I was about 10 years old, I was sitting at a stoplight in the car with my mom, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was contemplating the nature of time and how odd it was that time just keeps moving on. And at that moment, I just said, I wonder what it would be like to bookmark this moment in time and just see how it, like, if I can keep referencing back to it, and if I'll always remember it, and how what it feels like to get distance from it. And so I just fixed that moment in time, and it was just like, oh, now it's been 3 minutes since that's happened, and 5 minutes, and then and then a month and a week, and then a month, and then a year, and then many years. And it was this very odd event that was like a bookmark in time, and I watched myself sort of pull back from it along what felt like a timeline, and have sort of throughout my life just noticed, just had that very odd feeling of kind of observing what it's the impermanent nature of reality, and how we kind of move along a timeline, but we can also have these significant events that fix aspects in time.
Right. Perfect. So that would be an ideal one to use. So if you're listening and you're trying to consider which one could I use, something that's just meaningful. So here, something that's very meaningful to you, that's why because somebody who, timestamps a particular moment and then refers back to it. I consider that as pretty insightful of a little 10-year-old. That's why it's not so much that the event itself seems to stand out. It's the meaning that you applied to it that makes it particularly significant.
Yeah.
It really, so I think that's a good one, because I think, when we measure our past in a particular way, such as if we measure it with fear or we measure it with resentment or something, then all of our future paths are branching out from that point. So every time we bring up the past and the present, we actually set the future from this reaction or relationship to the past. And if we can actually change the past or rewrite it, and especially those synchronous moments, because I'm going to do something a little different with them, that's going to look at the wisdom or the openness that you can bring in, perhaps what wisdom is present right here, and then you start to rewrite that future. So you rewrite the past, you rewrite the future, change the past, change the future. So again, this is Sky's diagram. It starts to speak to us about the currency of trust and synchronicity and unconditional love, that when we come across these meaningful events, so these synchronicities, The experiences that you're seeking to have sit on a tree of possibilities, right? And when you have a meaningful event or a synchronicity, they point you towards exactly those experiences you're seeking to have. So the meaningful experience actually becomes more likely because it leads to what you're seeking to have. That's why synchronicities, people think, why did that happen? But it actually points you. It's often sticks out, like that experience you had as a 10-year-old, so much so that you actually place it as a marker and you refer back to it. And it's the same with me, Holly. With that Tibetan monk's dream, because it happened the exact same dream, 365 days, over and over again. It was like, it kept, a bit like with you, I kept referring back to it every time because it was so significant. It led to my own personal relationship with the Dalai Lama and then 40 years of study in those traditions because of that very deep and meaningful relationship that it had triggered back when I was two and three. So when you change the past, so if you change the past with, forgiveness or with awareness, it becomes your future. So when you consider this, here's what we normally think of as our past, present, and future, right? We tend to think of, just as you were saying, like that we've got a past, we've got a present, we've got a future, and we tend to think of the past as fixed and unchangeable, and the present as what it is now, and the future as something that hasn't happened yet. But if we consider that when we go back and we take an event in the past, and if, for example, we apply forgiveness to our relationship with our father, then that past actually becomes our future, because we're actually, from the very moment that we shift our relationship to the past or shift our perspective to the past, from that very moment, instead of going in what we have considered as this linear fashion, we're actually moving into a whole different future, which is a changed future with forgiveness or awareness, especially if we keep applying compassionate awareness or forgiveness or open, limitless awareness to a situation. The future that opens is completely different. It's not the linear progression that we've felt.
Can I just ask or interject? Like, let's say, just to clarify, let's say we're talking about somebody who was abused as a child, right? So they're bringing that in and they're going to apply forgiveness. You're not saying that the abuse didn't happen?
No.
You're not implying that. You're just saying that
our relationship to it, right, and the energy that we store in the present, that is our relationship with it, shifts. And as you know, if our energy is contracted, right, then we continue to see the world in a contracted way. But if we bring an energy that's actually beginning to open, then suddenly opportunities that were never available to us present themselves.
Let me give an example that maybe will bring this home, that I'd like to offer. As many people know, I had a mold illness for about a year in 2018, and it was really awful when I was going through it. It was very traumatic because I couldn't figure out what was wrong and I was very sick. And then I want you to verify if this is kind of what you're talking about, Stephen. And then what I came to realize as I worked through the mold and then actually shifted my career to doing the work I'm doing now, which is sitting here doing this podcast, none of that would have happened had it not been for the mold illness, because the mold really, it played a really key role. And also my I came to a realization that I wanted to shift some of my going from being a biologist to doing this work. But the mold played a really important role in that. And I don't think that I would have shifted into this new work had it not been for the impact of that health issue. Yeah. And what ended up happening is that because of that, because I love the work I do now and I feel so positive about it, I've rewritten the story of the mold to be actually thankful that it happened, because it's a part of the reason I do the work that I do now. So
exactly.
is that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That shift from the mold is a problem to the mold is the thing that actually saved me and gave me the future I have now, has rewritten the mold story in my mind.
Exactly. And it potentially shifts your present into being totally open to whatever happens. We start to actually not just understand, but potentially welcome the tensions of life in a completely different way than we did before. We're not so close to them. And this speaks right through into the transition that we call death, that we start to actually see life and death in a completely different way, and in a much more open way. And as you said, you're essentially expressing a type of a gratitude for you're not trying to shift the mold as being a very difficult or challenging experience, just as the same way you're not trying to shift for example, an abusive relationship that happens with somebody in the past.
Denying what happened.
Yeah. So you're not denying what happens, but what you are looking at is that event propels you in potentially could be a very open and very positive direction, which wouldn't have been there without that. Right. So that what the mold did for you is it actually opened a possibility, because you were curious about it and curious enough to want to find some solutions. You then start to recognize the events. You don't hold on to that event any longer, and you change your relationship to it in a way where it becomes a propeller of wisdom. It's it gives you a whole different perspective on life. And a lot of what I'm speaking about is, of course, shifting perspective. Once we start to shift our perspective, we start to open to a whole different possibility, a whole different set of possibilities, and they are potentially infinite.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the reframing, which is kind of how I see it, when we reframe an event in the past into a positive narrative that, ultimately helps us in the future, we shift the energy around that. And that in turn opens up what I hear you say. And my personal experience is when we do that reframe, it actually opens us up to new possibilities we might not have actually been open to because we were holding on to the old.
Exactly.
Old energy.
Exactly. And so you could, in terms of this diagram, you could say that the old energy would propel us down this path, and the new energy actually propels us through into a different future. Considering that all those futures are available, you could decide to hold on to the mold story, right? And to be extremely resentful and to go right through your life extremely resentful for that situation. That would propel you down this path. Yeah, right. And then if you open to it, you potentially become open to a whole series of opportunities that were simply never there until you did open to them.
Yep. I think it's very powerful. I completely agree.
So no, that was a great example. Really, really wonderful example. So the examples that I've considered, that I want you to consider as we go through this exercise, is take, for example, your dad. And so I'll use my dad as an example. There's a chance that I'm angry with my dad for some reason. He did something that really upset me in my life when I was a teenager, and there is a chance that I'm going to put him in a separate room for the rest of my life. So this is what I'm calling the separate room down here. And that's the chance you never resolve the situation, right? And you decide that that's where you're going to live with it, and you're okay to whatever okay means about keeping it all separate. But if, for example, and that's where it's going to end up, is that room, there is therefore then no potential in that relationship. There is no opportunity to resolve or no opportunity to move beyond it. And that there is a sense of contraction around that. But if, for example, you bring forgiveness to it, which is about openness, and this is why forgiveness has been the path of it doesn't matter which teaching you look at, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, and so on, there is just forgiveness is right at the heart of so many of these practices. And you start to see why, because every opportunity that you have to bring forgiveness is a possibility to rewrite history, because you are literally starting to alter the path towards which you head in the future. So that actually, in rewriting history, you rewrite your future. Or as Holly so beautifully put, by having a different attitude towards the mold, she was potentially open to what she's doing right now. Whereas she may not have been, she may still be with the Nature Conservancy as another path. And I considered for many years, you know, when the Buddha first came out of the forest, so when the Buddha first came out of the forest and was looking at what to do, what to bring to people, the first insight, as you'll read if you've read many of the beautiful passages on the Buddha, was on past lives. And I've often considered, why was that? Why would the Buddha put such an emphasis on past lives when for many people they don't experience past lives? I've been very fortunate in that my recall's extremely strong. So I know and have had confirmed on multiple occasions the power of those past lives. And I thought, well, of course, to put it in ordinary terms, it's just like our flexible histories. Imagine the Buddha coming out enlightened in pure open awareness and shining this awareness on all his past lives. So, for example, he tells the tale of when he had to murder somebody on a ship to stop that murderer killing all the crew. And of course, that had quite some degree of karma to it. And imagine with his full awareness, shining his light of awareness on that particular past life. You can imagine it's like a nuclear or neutrino explosion all in itself, right? Because you bring the full light of awareness into that whole life. So this is what, with their insight, this is what I was doing with my 2-year-old, 3-year-old monk's tale, is I've, over the past quite a few days, I just sat with this experience and kept letting it arise in full awareness, as I'm going to show you how to do. And it was just so incredible. It was like, yeah, it was like a neutrino explosion. It was like such an aha to recognize what the Buddha was aware of, that the liberation possible in bringing awareness not just to your past. So if we extrapolate, you know, Holly's experience of the mold, and if we extend that into a moldy past life, because I like that, a moldy past life, right? And you consider what it would mean if you had knowledge of it to bring your full awareness or forgiveness or openness to that past life. What an incredible shift that would mean for your consciousness, because then you're starting to open to the, you know, full length and breadth of what's beyond space and time, because we tend to see it as a very fixed continuum, right? So I thought, yeah, imagine the Buddha shining the light of awareness on a moldy past life. What an incredible, you know, if Holly gets this aha now and shifts into doing all the beautiful work she's doing, what an aha that must have been for the Buddha. So, you know, moving on from that, there are a lot of techniques that you can avail yourself of, and I'm not going to do this particular one, but I just wanted to point it out, that neuro-linguistic programming. So I trained as both a counselor and in neuro-linguistic programming for some time years ago, and there's a program called the dynamic spin technique, which does do this. It takes an awareness of a particular event and it pushes it out, brings awareness to it, makes changes to it, forgives it, and then pushes it back in. That is one way you can do it. So there are a lot of ways that we can, a lot of perspectives and ways that we can look on what Holly was talking about, reframing or rewriting or recreating. And the way that I'm going to do it is to bring in this way, to bring an awareness to your past history in two ways. One is in this uncomfortable event. So we'll use Holly's mold as the uncomfortable event example. And the other one is to a synchronous event. So we're going to use Holly's 10-year-old in the backseat of the car and the timestamp of impermanence, because I love that. It's like, oh, you were so wise at 10, Holly. And you were so wise in the mold experience too, you know. So I pray that you have the blessing of a couple of experiences like wise Holly, that you can find both a synchronous event or an event that has significant meaning, and also an event that has some degree of discomfort. And what you're going to do, so in my event, so let's talk about Holly's event as a 10-year-old. So I'm going to guide you into two experiences. One is in terms of bringing open, compassionate awareness to a past discomfort. But the second is bringing open, limitless awareness to a meaningful event or to a meaningful time in your life. Because as Holly said, and I think it's a great example, she went back again and again. This is what we tend to do to meaningful events, right? She went back again to this timestamp when she was 10, kind of measuring and being aware. So what if she brings full, open wisdom awareness to that 10-year-old self and almost embarks in not just a conversation, but an opening to what might arise right now. So that's what I want you to do, is to consider those two events. So we are about to engage in some practice, Holly, but I wanted to just see if you, or if you've got any questions, or if you, if this has brought up anything that you might want to share, or any other kind of insight or question of clarity you might want to pose.
Well, I'd love if you would you had shared with me that you had started doing this with your dream and it shifted. And so maybe it would be helpful for you just to describe what is the goal exactly? Is the goal to highlight that reframe? Is the goal to open up a window of door of possibilities that you might not have recognized?
Yes, it's both of those. Yeah, you've perfectly said. It's both to highlight the reframe itself, because what happens with a synchronous or a meaningful event is we tend not to go, it happens, and then we don't really inquire into it. So for example, if you look at a lot of the ancient practices like Mahamudra and Dzogchen, and any Vipassana, self-inquiry, Vedanta, Advaita practice, there's a large part of that which is self-inquiry. And one of the things that we don't often inquire into, because we just take them as being meaningful events, is meaningful events, unless you're a 10-year-old like yourself, where you go back and back and back again into that timestamp. So what you're going to do is you're going to, in terms of the compassionate practice, you're going to bring compassion to that event. And in terms of the meaningful event, you are going to highlight the reframe. And then in that openness, you're going to open to the possibility that there might be wisdom actually present in that 10-year-old and in all the marks that you've made. I mean, you're an interesting case, right? Because you've made timestamps and referred back to that event. Sometimes people just have a synchronous event. They don't think much about it, right? So an example is a synchronous event I had some years ago was where somebody just turned up at a bank teller machine and spoke to me about a friend out of the blue. They didn't know me, they didn't know my friend, but they actually spoke directly to me about a friend of mine. And it was so incredible. It was so out of the blue that I've often, curiously questioned that, but I just sort of left it aside. And then I started to explore this, and a great deal of wisdom came out of that deep self-inquiry into the nature of that exact moment. Because if you consider it, synchronicity is pointing to very meaningful events that can open multiple opportunities to discover what you're seeking. So what if you start to really deeply inquire and illuminate that particular experience? That particular experience in itself has incredible and potentially infinite opportunities, because it is it's an event of synchronicity.
Yeah. Could it also be an event that just put your life into a certain direction, like I met my previous husband he had gone to attended something at a college that I was doing an event, and he wasn't actually supposed to go attend, but his friend Dave couldn't go, and so he asked him to attend. And because he attended that event, he met me, and we ended up getting married and having two beautiful children together. And so, I'd often thought about that, like, well, what happened if Dave wasn't sick and or couldn't attend the event, and then maybe we wouldn't have met. And I know people probably have lots of examples in their life of, like, wow, because I ran into this person or this happened, I met my husband or wife or whatever, and you realize how that one event set your whole life on a trajectory.
Totally. I think that's a brilliant example. I think something as simple as that can be, that's why I'm using the word meaningful. Sometimes people think, oh, synchronicity, where is that? But just a simple, meaningful event, and something as profound as that, because you're right, that pivoted your whole life into a particular direction, which has affected you, for some 20 more years. So those are really good examples. So if somebody's listening and that's what they want to focus on, that would be perfect. Because in fact, when you bring this open awareness practice to it, you might suddenly recognize something that you start to see the patterns and the openings in a way that you haven't done before.
Yeah, great. Because I wanted people to feel like they could pick an event like that, because I feel like that's, most people have those, like, oh my gosh, if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have ended up where I did.
That's a perfect example, that if you hadn't done this, you wouldn't be where you're at. I like that. That can be a Hollyism, a Holly definition. I love that. All right, so we're ready then.
Great. So you're gonna lead us in a practice.
Yep. I will lead you in a practice. So I'll just stop sharing for a second. All right. So I'll ask you, if you're listening, just to relax and find yourself a gentle space. Make sure you're not looking at the screen, and that your awareness is simply aware of the boundless opportunities that are present. And as I have explained, we're going to look carefully. We're going to do a self-inquiry deeply into an area of life where there's been some irritation or discomfort, or where a relationship hasn't been that great for you. And then we're also going to look at a meaningful event, or an event of synchronicity, or an event that has pointed you in a particular direction of life. So to begin with, I'd like you just to close your eyes. And in closing your eyes, I want you to place the soles of your feet firmly on the ground, and just awaken your sensory experience in the soles of your feet, and relax and soften your toes. And just feel as if they're melting down into the ground. So feel this grounding presence in the earth and your feet and legs. And let your palms be cupped in your lap, and rest one in the other. The thumb tips are lightly touching, and you're very soft and relaxed. The hands feel very soft. Feel like they're melting down too into your legs. Relax your shoulders, your arms, your neck. Feel everything becoming so light that it's like clouds in the sky. So let your neck, your head relax, your body, all the way down, back, chest, abdomen, hips, right down your legs into your feet. Let everything relax and soften, as if it's like a cloud in an open blue sky. Then feel your spine being drawn gently upright, as if a string is pulling you at the top of your head. So you really feel uplifted, clear. Tuck your chin slightly, relax your tongue, sit upright, smile, the Buddhist smile, or the Christ smile, or the Magdalene smile. Smile the green Tara smile. Smile with gratitude for this moment and for people in your life. Smile and breathe with love and gratitude for this beautiful feeling of calmness and happiness that's present right now. Feel it expanding in every cell of your body, as if every cell is alive with this happiness and gratitude. And then just drop into your belly and breathe there. So drop your awareness right down. Sometimes we find our awareness gets kind of stuck behind our eyes. So drop it into the back of your head. first into the back of the skull and look out through your eyes. Try even dropping it behind you, into the wall behind you, and look back at your body. And feel into your heart. And drop down into your belly, into your abdomen, and just gently breathe. Just check in with your breathing and allow the pattern of breathing to arise and fall naturally. Breathing in and breathing out. There's just this beautiful calmness. As you breathe in, you're aware of the in-breath all the way on the inhale until you pause and there's a silence and a stillness in this gap. And then you're present all the way on the exhale. You become present to this space within you, space within the body, this space of calm happiness. You become present to this space all around you. And there's no inside, no outside, just this awareness of space. Extends out in all directions, above and below, to left and right, and front and behind. Wherever you look, wherever you seek to find an edge, there's no edge. There's just this limitless, boundless space. Space is just space. It's vast and boundless. And in this space of awareness, I want you to allow an experience to arise, an uncomfortable experience that you might have had perhaps some years ago, maybe with your dad, your mum, brother, sister, friend, whatever it is, whatever the experience is, allow it to arise. So not too grabby, not too challenging, just enough so that you can feel. Maybe there's irritability or anger there, or a sense of discomfort. Could be some experience you've had with something, just as Holly described, like mold, or could be some experience that's happened in the past that was uncomfortable. Just allow it to rise within this open awareness. And as you allow it to arise, open your heart to it, open your compassionate heart to this experience. Just welcome it, allow it, embrace it. Don't push it away, and don't grab onto it either. Just allow it to be. Recognize it, connect with this open-heartedness. And see if you can open up to the blessing of the experience, just as Holly did. See if you can open up to this feeling, this sense that it too has offered a lesson or an understanding, or has propelled your life in a particular way, and that you're open to that. See if you can feel a compassionate awareness that embraces that allows this experience to arise and allows you to feel love or compassion or welcoming or gratitude for it. As you feel this unfolding experience of this discomfort arising, see if you can experience it not as an object that you're focusing on, but rather as an experience that's playing out in this vast field of compassionate awareness, this open, loving awareness that embraces all. Almost as if the experience, that uncomfortable experience, is happening within this vast, compassionate awareness. And that any uncomfortable sensation you're experiencing is just a wave in the ocean of this compassionate awareness. Just relax into that full expanse of compassionate awareness and allow this experience of the past to unfold effortlessly. Really bring the power of your gratitude or compassion and love to this experience. You might feel a shift in the body, right? A easing in the chest, or a movement in the belly, or an opening in the throat. Really allow that compassionate awareness to fully embrace this experience, and then just relax into this full expanse of this loving, compassionate awareness, and allow the experience to unfold effortlessly. Now drop your focus on this experience. You don't have to orient towards the experience nor ignore it. Just rest for a moment in open, effortless awareness of what's present. Just rest in open, effortless awareness. Now I want you to bring to mind an experience of synchronicity or a meaningful experience in your life. Something that really touched you, that perhaps pivoted your life or propelled it in a particular direction. It could be just as Holly described, like a meaningful relationship when you first met, or perhaps a meaningful event, such as she had with impermanence when she was just a young child. Bring to mind this experience and really see if you can feel it. So if you can see it, make the image brighter. If you can hear it, then make the sounds clear. If you can feel it, make your senses strong. So really bring this experience here and now into the present. You're bringing the past, this past meaningful experience here and into the present right now. Take a few moments to do that and notice how this feels. Now, really open to the wisdom of this experience. Consider that you're connecting with this open, boundless opportunity of this event or experience, this emptiness that has the power of infinite possibility. There's a quality to that meaningful event that runs all the way through your life. This infinite opportunity, this power to access synchronicity in every moment. See if you can open up to the blessing of that moment. See if you can open up and feel all the wisdom, all this timeless awareness that's fully in that event or person. And all of that wisdom is now opening in you. Really feel a sense of connection with this meaningful event or person. And feel all of it dissolving into light, light of wisdom, and all of this wisdom energy merges into you. And as this wisdom unfolds, this wisdom experience, see if you can experience this not just as an object that you're focusing on, but as wisdom experience playing in the field of this limitless awareness, this vast emptiness filled with infinite possibility. It's almost as if this synchronicity or meaningful event is happening within this open, vast awareness and connecting, interconnected. All of the wisdom you're experiencing waves on the surface of this ocean of awareness. All of the wisdom you're experiencing is the ocean. And you're relaxing into this full expanse of the wisdom, seeing the power of wisdom throughout all your life, and allowing this experience of wisdom to unfold effortlessly. Now you can drop the focus on this experience. You don't need to orient towards the experience, nor do you have to ignore it. Just rest in this open, vast, effortless wisdom of awareness. Now slowly become aware of the space within you and the space all around you. No inside, no outside. Simply vast, limitless awareness. You can slowly open your eyes as this limitless awareness, looking through with the wisdom of awareness that takes in everything around you with gratitude and appreciation, love and awe, delight and innocence and the beauty and freshness of a young child. No limits, no boundaries, no edges. Just the vast openness and wisdom of being. As you begin to move and go about your day, feel every movement, every moment as an expression of this wisdom and compassionate awareness. This one is fresh and open, and this one rich and beautiful, and this one spontaneous and effortless, and this one filled with gratitude, filled with love. Notice how everything happens within this pure, infinite, open, indivisible, limitless, and loving awareness. Thank you always for your divine and immaculate practice.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you too, Holly. That was a beautiful sharing with you, and thank you for sharing about your own personal experiences in both challenging situations and also very meaningful and synchronous ones. I think they particularly will really touch people with, because it's very relatable. So I'm very grateful for your input.
Oh, you're so welcome. And yeah, thank you to everybody who's here, who's watching, who's meditated along with us. Yeah, that was very powerful, and really appreciate it. It brought me back my synchronous event that I chose. I actually chose a slightly different event than the 10-year-old when I was 11 and when I was 6. I was already into inquiry. I was destined down the self-inquiry path because at 6 years old, I turned to my mom in the car when she was driving along. I know exactly where I was. I was in Pacific Palisades. I was right in front of where Yogananda's center is in Pacific Palisades, Lake Shrine. And we were headed up the hill. We lived there, and I turned to her and I said, "Who am I? Who am I?" And I remember just feeling very like, what is this? What is this body thing we're in? And it just didn't make any sense. It still doesn't, right? I'm still on the path.
And what kind of insight did you discover in this practice?
What I discovered was that it was such a significant event because it was such a pointing to what my path would be later on. And I was able to go back to that, make it richer, brighter, and I feel like I'm not done with it. I feel like I started the investigation, but that that experience has more to tell me about what's important about that path for me. But what it felt like was that I could feel that sense as I went into it. I could start to re-experience the sense of wanting to know what awareness was.
Right. And that's such an aha, right? You actually re-experience the very thing that was so meaningful at the time. That's exactly it. And might I say, with this exploration I've been doing into, reliving my dream, 2-year-old, 3-year-old dream, I've actually done it quite a number of times over a number of days. So I'd really encourage you and anybody listening, if you discover that meaningful connection, because it's actually the quality of the meaningful connection that when you consider it, what an aha, it's been there right since you were 6. And all the answers were kind of there and present in that, non-local space-time, right? All the answers are there, and it's kind of pointing to it. Like, as you say, I mean, the power of the meaningfulness is that the young wisdom actually is saying, hey, don't miss this.
And I think what you have often pointed to is that, and I think of Rupert Spira when I say this, that we actually never experience the past. We only experience now. So every memory we have is experienced in the now.
Exactly.
And right, where no one's, I love Rupert says this, no one's ever visited the past. It doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Right? No one's ever visited the future.
Right. Exactly. And when you perceive that, when you suddenly recognize that actually all you're ever doing is experiencing the present, it's like suddenly, because we tend to, the way our linear, we have a CV or we have a diary or it's got dates and it all seems to be a sequence of past to present, but it's not, of course. The moment, as you said, the moment you wake up that 6-year-old self, that's present. That's not past.
Right.
You're actually waking up a whole new potential future because the present suddenly is alert and awake, which are the very qualities of enlightening oneself, is to be alert and present and awake. And the real power of those meaningful events is that they are a lot more vivid or poignant in our lives. And so when we wake them up again and again in the present, suddenly you go, oh, the very qualities I've been looking for, they are right there.
Right.
And they become, as you said, highlight. In the reframe, you highlight them.
Right. I also think about something that Craig Hamilton said, and I've been doing his direct awakening course, that, you know, that person of the past, the person of yesterday, doesn't exist anymore. That's a fiction that the mind has created. In that sense, the 6-year-old self doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
All that exists is what's here, and if I bring it to mind right now, that felt awareness of being in the car with my mom, and asking that question, right? And
yeah.
so that,
as you were saying that, I had very bright lights shining at me in the ether. So that's a very good pointing out for you.
saw you look up.
yeah, no, I could. It's like torch, you know, it's like that when somebody speaks the truth, I sometimes the light in the space suddenly looks like 2 searchlights. That's what. So that's
such
very
an aha, right? To really realize that our self of yesterday, in that sense, our self of 5 minutes ago, doesn't exist.
Right. And that everything is present. This is present. All that is present is this presence here. And that presence has infinite opportunity. And once you realize that present has infinite opportunity, then anything you bring into it can literally be a springboard into infinite possibility. It is so exciting to consider that, oh, I bring this recognition that I had, because that's what it was, a recognition as a 6-year-old that there was something really important. And that recognition literally is brought here now. That's so it's the quality of recognizing. You're bringing a 6-year-old's quality of recognizing. So it's the freshness of that recognition. You bring it here present again. You think, oh, that felt so important. It's because you actually recognize that quality of freshness all over again here now. It's like a miracle. It's like you bring, you know, when I remember in the work of Joe Dispenza and lots of other, you know, beautiful people who have shared about how when you bring this, no matter what the issue you're facing, when you bring this quality of this potent opportunity of the present moment right now, and you're just open to it, and for a moment, for example, the pain of whatever it is disappears, you think, where did that go? It was so present a moment ago, but it's not, you know, and that opportunity that the present moment of that instant offers is like a recognition of the infinite possibility of being itself, and the power to heal spontaneously, for example, which is what, you know, Joe Dispenza went through in that very difficult time that he faced.
Yeah. So sorry, go.
No.
Okay. Well, to me, what it feels that we are only prisoners of our past if we allow ourselves to be.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. It is that allowing, right? When you consider that this word allowing, we are literally allowing whatever occurs. We are literally allowing the past to impinge on us, for example, if that's what happens.
Right.
It's not, we can quite often blame things and say, oh, it's somebody's fault that they did that in the past, you know, and like many of you listening, I had significant trauma in my high school days because of some situations at that time. And I've worked with them in a way, like many of you have with trauma, where you really open and allow it. And that word, allowing, you literally allow it, regardless of your fears and inhibitions and terrors around it, you literally allow it to come up and be present and heal.
Right. And what go ahead.
No. Well, I was just going to say, you can't do that without allowing it. You have to get to the point where you have enough confidence in this present moment to say, actually, it's okay.
Yeah, allowing, and then our dear friend Blaise Kennedy, who often talks about completing, allowing that pain that you experienced to complete, wherein you free yourself from it. So you in a sense, you bring it up, you bring up the painful memory to complete it, to allow that energy to move through you, um, and open to it, so you don't have to keep re-experiencing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think if you compare that to what you were experiencing about allowing and opening the 6-year-old's recognition, you start to recognize, that needs to complete. You said it yourself. I feel like I have to go back now because I can feel it there. And you sense in the same way as trauma that meaningful events also have a completion factor that you really know. It's amazing, right? It's such an aha. You sort of go, I can feel it now.
Yeah.
There's a sense that it needs to complete. Now I can see, my whole path in life, because all that's present now is the recognition of that 6-year-old self and the opportunity that was present there. And perhaps the 6-year-old's wisdom didn't quite fully grok it at the time, but the 6-year-old's freshness allowed it to be present enough so that you, even as a 6-year-old, you recognized it as a meaningful event. And then you come, I'm present the fact that I remember people like Uri Geller and Tarot, and many of my friends who had these, very mystical, wondrous cities or powers arise. And it was often as a result of a very meaningful event somewhere in their childhood. That Uri Geller describes this sphere of light suddenly appearing, and Tarot described when he was sick and he died, and then he had this voice, and these meaningful events that are pointing out to you at a very young age something extremely crucial. And perhaps the only difference is that they didn't miss that, and they've gone back to it, and they've worked in that nature of deep self-inquiry to using Blaze's words, to complete. And you come back and you go, there is an essential wisdom there. I often think of many of the masters who describe, when I'm in Mingyur Rinpoche's retreats, he often describes these really poignant and brief encounters with his dad when he was very young, where his dad, he was meditating one day and his dad said, no, that's not meditation. You're just faking it. And it sort of shocked him. And he's often talks about this, the shock that he felt that sort of jolted him into this open awareness of, and that has kept pointing out to him. And so that's become a, felt sense all the way through, and that he's revisited. And he's mentioned it many, many times. And so like your 6-year-old experience, the recognition itself, it's the recognition of that infinite quality that exists for all of us, that you were open to.
No, I think what you said is so important, and especially I want to just highlight when you were talking about a child, something important in childhood, because I find that working with my coaching clients too, that we often, the thing that we're stuck on as adults, maybe it's a core feeling of lack of self-worth, or blame, or shame, or guilt, the big ones that come up for most people when they're working through, things that are sticky for them. And it will go back to, I was in the kitchen when I was 7 years old and I was getting a peanut butter sandwich and my mom chided me for it, and it was like they bring that up and they remember it. And it's like, that's because that core shame or feeling of self-worth was constructed then, and it's still waiting to complete. It's still waiting to finalize, to recognize that you fundamentally are worthy, you fundamentally are whole, you fundamentally, guilt and shame are illusory, that they're not, those are mind constructed, that you don't choose to live by. Exactly. And we need to complete, though, and reconcile. We have to have this grand reconciliation of that childhood event where that was kind of seared in our minds.
Exactly. And one of the benefits, obviously, there's many different ways in therapy you can do that. And when you do that with open, boundless awareness, so you enter the open state so that you really are truly open, and allow that to come, and allow you yourself to recognize and complete and feel and allow and feel and allow and feel and allow until it definitely completes. It like it vanishes. There's no longer the litmus test is allowing it to rise and seeing if there's any grab, if there's any, and then bringing an equally positive event and seeing whether there's any grab between the two. Then you can start to actually feel into, oh, there's kind of a equanimity that is present now with that challenge that I've been working with. And I found that particularly useful. So, in my own case, to bring up the traumatic events I experienced at high school alongside, say, sporting events that I felt, and they eventually reach this point of equanimity where you feel, to talking to what Blaise said, that there's this sense of completion, and you actually, it's like an aha. The sense of completion is a literal aha, because in bringing them both up, you feel, oh, there's actually a really balanced. It's not that I haven't erased the event. I've actually developed a relationship of equanimity and openness and allowing and welcome to it, in the same way as I might with a sporting event where I did very well. I feel that same sense. And that's a real powerful way to help test completion, because sometimes we don't know. We feel, oh, it's still there. And then as you work with, and that's the advantage, like you said, with your 6-year-old self, when you can feel the quality and there's just a little work that needs to be done to complete it. That in itself is such a deep aha as well, because you've recognized the quality, you've recognized there's something important there and meaningful, and you're fully present with what you could do, and the fact that maybe you just need to approach it slightly differently, with a little more compassion, have a bit more patience, spend a little bit more time with it. It's like greeting a good friend, right? You really want to take your time with that. That's what's present, is this interconnectedness that we have with everything in our being. You're muted.
Yeah.
There we go.
Maybe we should leave it there. I know we've gone quite long, and that's really beautiful. And I just so appreciate you touching this subject. I think it's incredibly profound, and just really wonderful to have you on. Thank you to everybody who joined us today for this session, and wishing you all a beautiful weekend and lots of love and support wherever you are on the globe.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Holly. Well, you are profound, and so is everybody listening. That it's the nature of your own profound being that we're pointing to. So much love to all.
Yes, much love to all of you.